We like to tell ourselves that peace is humanity's natural state, that deep down we're all cooperative, and the conflict we see in the world is just an aberration, a temporary stain on an otherwise clean slate. It's a beautiful thought, but what if the true story is much darker? What if the archaeological record tells a much more complicated and often more violent story? Across continents and millennia, prehistoric remains show startlingly common evidence of violent trauma. This doesn't mean our ancestors were monsters, but it does challenge the comforting myth of a universally peaceful past, suggesting that group conflict wasn't an exception, but a recurring feature of human group cohesion. This leads to a deeply uncomfortable question. What if the dream of a world with no enemies, a world of total harmony, is not just naive, but dangerous? What if the very attempt to build that world, as known as it sounds, could be the very thing that unravels civilization from within? What if a world without us versus them is a fatal trap? This vision is undeniably seductive. A future where the lines between us and them dissolve, a world without tribe or nation or creed, and they're replaced by a single shared human identity. We see this dream in pop culture, in philosophy, in many speeches. It feels like the moral endpoint of human civilization. After all, who wouldn't want a world without enemies? The problem is, this utopian vision is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of our own psychology. It assumes that large scale cooperation is our natural default, and that the conflict is just a foreign containment that can be filtered out. But the evidence from social psychology and history suggests the opposite. Widespread human cooperation isn't the state of nature, it is an active and often fragile achievement. And paradoxically, one of the most powerful engines for that cooperation has always been the very thing we dream of eliminating: a rival. Now, the uncomfortable truth is that our minds have a powerful tendency to draw lines. This instinct to characterize the world into an in group and an out group. It's not some moral failing. It appears to be a deep seated feature of our cognitive architecture, a tool that helped our ancestors survive. And this isn't just a theory, it's one of the most consistent findings in social psychology. In the 1970s, the psychologist Henry Teufel ran his famous minimal group experiments. He brought strangers into a lab together, divided them into groups based on trivial criteria, like which abstract painter they preferred. And what he found was astonishing. With no history of conflict, nothing real at stake, people almost immediately started favouring their own group. They would give more rewards to their own in group members, even if it meant their own group took home less overall. And this isn't necessarily about hating the other group, it's about a powerful and automatic loyalty to one's own. Social identity theory suggests this happens because our self esteem is tied to the status of the group we belong to. This wiring has consequences. In his influential, though debated work, anthropologist Keeley surveyed pre modern societies and found an extremely high percentage of them were frequently at war, 80 to 90% by some counts. His work challenges this idea of the peaceful past, or the peaceful hunter gatherer lifestyle, a picture where conflict was a common pressure shaping social evolution. This doesn't mean humans are inherently evil, but it does suggest that our capacity for intense group conflict is very real. To see this mechanism in its purest form, we can turn to the most famous experiments in psychology, Sharif's Robber's Cave experiment. In the summer of 1954, Sharif and his team brought 22 well-adjusted 11-year-old boys together to a summer camp in Oklahoma. The boys were all from similar backgrounds, and they were randomly split into two groups, the Rattlers and the Eagles. For the first week, these groups were kept apart. They bonded, they created their own flags, they developed their inside jokes, they built distinct group identities before they even knew the other group existed. Then the researchers introduced competition. They set up a series of tournaments, baseball, tug of war, with prizes like medals and pocket knives for the winners. The shift was immediate and dramatic. Friendly rivalry spiraled into genuine hostility. The groups started taunting each other, which had escalated to burning the other's flag, ransacking their cabins, and collecting crab apples to use as ammunition. It wasn't the boys' personalities creating the conflict, it was the competitive structure they were in. Here's the most critical part. The researchers then tried to broker peace. First, they tried simple contact, bring the boys together for meals and movies, and it was a complete disaster. Far from reducing hostility, it just created new opportunities for fights, food fights, and insults. So, what happens when you scale this up to the level of a nation? What happens when a society believes it's exterminated all its external rivals? The work of sociologists like Simmel and Koza offers a framework. They argued that conflict with an outside group is a powerful force for creating that internal cohesion that builds that society in the first place, makes it work as a cooperate. It sharpens the sense of us, it clarifies group boundaries, and it rallies people together. They even noted that some groups may feel need to invent enemies in order to maintain their own unity. We can see examples of this throughout history. And even recently, think about South Korea versus North Korea. Would they have their own identities without one another to be the foil? And then looking at our own past in England, we've had rivals in the past. We've had France for hundreds of years that helped us form an identity of what was distinctly English. More recently, we've had rivalries of Germany and maybe even more recently Argentina. These things have helped us identify who we are as opposed to who are we not and who our key rivals and outgroups are. The evidence is clear. The instinct to form groups, to create an us and a them, is a fundamental part of our psychology. For millennia, hundreds of millennia, this mechanism has been the engine of human cooperation, binding people together to achieve what none could do alone. This noble dream of a world without enemies, the core aspiration of modern liberal universalism, is therefore built on a dangerous fiction. It assumes we can simply erase the outgroup and exist in a state of universal harmony. But this ignores the psychological machinery that makes society cohesion in the first place possible. By prioritizing a radical individualism and a universal identity, it risks dissolving the very social bonds that make society cohesive. In its pursuit of a universal identity, this worldview can strip away the local, meaningful group identities that give people a sense of belonging. Individuals are told that they are citizens of the world, yet they feel connected to nothing and no one in particular. This creates a society of atomized individuals adrift in an abstract sea of humanity, leading not to unity, but to a profound alienation and social isolation. That sounds familiar to any of you. This raises a critical strategic question. If a society embraces a universalism that weakens its internal bonds and fractures its ability to cooperate, what happens when it's forced to compete with a society that is not liberal or against a group that retains a powerful, non-universalist and highly cohesive group identity? The historical record suggests the answer is not a pleasant one. In our next video, we'll explore this exact scenario by looking at how Great Britain is now grappling with the consequences of this unrestrained liberal universalism. To make sure you don't miss it, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. And for the comments, I have a question for you. How can we even define a society without a cohesive group or group interest?